Hey, welcome back to the SNS College Football Podcast. This is the Week 10 pod, and if you haven't watched any of the episodes before, we're going to briefly recap all things Week 9, and then we're going to preview the Week 10 games. We've got Utah at Washington, Oregon at USC, and then Florida at Georgia. And then the very last segment, we'll get into our Week 10 bets. So, Addison, let's start with Wisconsin at OSU. Just give me kind of like a quick takeaway from that game, like maybe the most important thing you saw.
Ohio State just continues to dominate everyone right now, going up against one of the best run defenses in the country, and OSU still pretty much had their way. And defensively, Chase Young couldn't be stopped. So Ohio State just continues to roll on, and now they're onto a bye week.
Tulman, just kind of same question, like maybe something important you took away from the game, or do you just have similar thoughts as Addison there?
Similar thoughts about Ohio State. What I took away from Wisconsin was I think they're an okay team, not as elite as we thought earlier in the year. There were some things that were exposed for them on the defensive side of the ball. I still think they are the best team in the West, but schedules may play out, and they might not have a chance to play Ohio State again.
Yeah, I mean Minnesota, our boys, Tulman, they're definitely in the driver's seat now, and they've got an interesting game coming up when they got Penn State, and then pretty tough stretch for them actually to end the year. But yeah, I mean I thought OSU, they had a little adversity once Cone snuck that ball in there right after halftime, and but then OSU kind of turned it on, and they still look like the best team to be in the country right now. So we'll move on to Auburn at LSU. This was a pretty competitive game. I think Auburn fought pretty hard, but Tulman, since obviously as we always allude to, LSU is kind of one of your adoptive teams. Your thoughts on that game and your main takeaway.
Well, I thought that LSU was the right side. Statistically, they dominated the game, and they just looked like the better team. But like they've had issues in other games this year, they haven't been able to quite put teams away. Their defense allowed Auburn to hang around in the game and really make it closer than it should have been. So LSU is going to need to figure out situational defense going forward, and they're going to the bye week. Got to get ready for the huge game against Alabama.
Yeah, Addison, did you? I guess I'll ask you real quick. Did you? Do you think Bo Nix is starting to get a little more comfortable? Like, do you think Auburn's got a pretty legit shot against Georgia and Alabama?
Against the better teams, he's still, just not efficient enough. 15 of 35 passing. They were able to run the ball, even with Whitlow being limited pretty much. But LSU, another big game from Burrow. Another pretty solid game running the ball for them too. So they've shown that, lately.
Right.
Even though they don't run the ball that much, that when they need to, they can go to that. I agree with Tulman. I did think they pretty much dominated this game, statistically at least. I mean, total yards was 508 to 287. Auburn was able to keep it close. They scored a late touchdown to make it a 3-point game, and then LSU was able to just run out the clock after that. So it was a competitive game. It wasn't like as close as the scoreboard indicated, I would say, but Auburn. Going forward, obviously they can still compete with these, elite teams in the SEC. So I just don't know if they're going to be able to beat Georgia or Bama at the end of the
year. LSU is really, they're climbing up my own power ratings, I think, in my mind, just because their defense is, I think, cleaning up some stuff that was, it's still not quite the same LSU defense, but it hasn't been as bad as I think some people think. It's actually been pretty solid. And then, like you said, Addison, if their running game continues to improve, that's only going to make that offense even more lethal. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see. I would expect Tua to try to give it a go, but I don't know how healthy he's going to be. I would favor LSU in that game right now if that's the case. But we'll move on quickly to the last game. There's not really a whole lot to talk about with this. Notre Dame at Michigan. Addison, just were you pretty shocked by this result?
Yeah, I thought that I expected a close game either way. I definitely did not see a blowout like this.
Yeah.
Definitely didn't see Michigan putting up 45 points. They still, Shea's still not playing well, but Michigan found their ground game a little bit. They ran for 300 yards. Hassan Haskins, the running back for them, seems to have provided a spark the last few weeks, I'd say. And ever since the second half of that Penn State game, that Michigan was just able to kind of carry that into this week too.
Yeah, we kind of talked about it on last week's pod where we thought if there could be an issue, it'd be with Notre Dame's rush defense. The metrics kind of said that they haven't been as good as people have thought, and that came to fruition. And like you said, Aston Haskins had a good game. Charbonnet provided some solid runs, but I do think Haskins is the guy that needs to touch the ball more if I had to choose between those two. But Tulman, your main takeaway from that game?
Disappointing offensive performance from Notre Dame. Michigan can't handle athleticism. I think they've proven that the last couple of years. But what Notre Dame has is receivers that I would describe as plotting, and I think they were able to handle that pretty well. I was also surprised that it was a blowout the way it was.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hear a single person saying that they thought this game would be a blowout either way. I do think most people thought that Notre Dame was going to win the football game, but with kind of watching how that line moved throughout the week and metrically, it just seemed like Michigan might have had a slight edge, and they found it in the ground game, obviously. So yeah, interesting moving forward. Notre Dame definitely out of the college football playoff. Michigan maybe getting a little bit better, and we'll see with them moving forward. But we'll move on to our Week 9 winners and losers. So, Tulman, do you want to start with? I'll let you choose winners or losers.
We'll start with winners.
Okay.
So, the obvious one is Chase Young. 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. One of the most dominant performances from a defensive end that I've seen in a long time. He just absolutely dominated Wisconsin in that game to the point that he would get in the backfield and Cohen would just submit. He would just lay down before he could get hit. So just huge game from Chase Young. Have some teams. Minnesota just absolutely dominated Maryland. They went to 8-0 and they clinched their season over win total.
Yes.
So nice win, Minnesota. I thought the way their schedule played out, they had a chance to start the season something like 7-1. But now that they've started 8-0, they could be in the driver's seat in the Big Ten West. Kansas got their 3rd win of the season by beating Texas Tech. Kind of a funny ending to the game. Kansas had a kick blocked. It was recovered by Texas Tech. This was going to be the game-winning kick. Recovered by Texas Tech. We thought the game was going to overtime. Texas Tech turned around, handed the ball off to Kansas. They recovered with time left. Kick to win the game. Clinched the over 2.5. 3 wins on the season for Kansas.
Right.
And then finally, just because of what happened to Oklahoma and to Notre Dame, Pac-12, Oregon and Utah are kind of back in the college football playoff discussion. I think they will continue to be there if they continue to win.
Yeah, I think that's kind of part of why we're going to preview a couple Pac-12 games. I think they're a little bit, or not a little bit, but as you said, a lot more important now. But I'll give some winners real quick, and then I'll go to Addison. I don't like doing this on this pod because this is like the team that we all grew up despising, but I have to say that the team up north is a winner this week. We've been hammering them all season. Pretty much everybody in the media has, their fans have, and they pulled it together in a big moment against a team that, might have been a little overrated, but, Michigan thoroughly dominated them, and, that could be something that propels them to a little bit better of a season than what maybe they were expecting, a few weeks ago. So I guess I'll give them a shout out. I still fucking hate them, but J.K. Dobbins on the other side of the OSU ball, he had over 200 yards from scrimmage. He, I think everyone was talking about nationally Jonathan Taylor coming into this game, and rightfully so. He's possibly the best running back in football, but J.K. Dobbins is right up there with him, and he had an amazing game. I thought his vision's incredible, the extra yards that he fought for, making some clutch plays in the pass game. I thought he played outstanding. And then, Tulman, you kind of briefly mentioned Kansas State. I'm going to give Chris Kleinman, their coach, a shout out. He was from what school did he come from again?
North Dakota State. three out of the last four FCS champions.
Yeah, so I think the casual fans they might not have cared who Kansas State hiring after legend Bill Snyder retired, but Chris Kleinman came in, a name that not a lot of people knew about, but he obviously was a legend at the FCS level, and he's got Kansas State playing pretty well. He doesn't have his players in there yet, but they play hard. I think he's going to try to run the ball and play some defense in that conference. So that's a big win for that program. I'll give them a shout out. But Addison, your winners?
Winners, I've got the Bama LSU loser. That's the result of Oklahoma losing. I think it opens the door up for whoever loses that game to still be in the 4 spot for the college football playoff. The way things are going right now. Next winner is Illinois. They now have a 2-game winning streak. So I don't remember the last time that happened for Illinois, and they're playing Rutgers this week, so they could easily make that 3 in a row. And if they win, they will hit their win total over for the year. So that'd be good for me personally because I had that.
Right.
And it's obviously Illinois this is one of the better seasons they've had recently. Then I've also got Chase Young. At this point, I think he's got to be in New York at the very least for the Heisman. Yeah. It would be an absolute joke if he's not there. And he's getting a lot of hype at this point. And just to put it in perspective, how well he's playing this year, he's averaging 1 sack every 12 dropbacks. Some of the other, great pass rushers recently, Myles Garrett had a sack every 26 dropbacks. Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa were every 38 and 40 dropbacks. So, that's how much better he was than these guys statistically this year. So he's just been putting up unreal numbers. 4 sacks against Wisconsin, 2 forced fumbles. Honestly, watching him play, it's kind of like playing with 12 guys on the field defensively for Ohio State. So it's he's just been that much of an advantage for Ohio State this year.
Yeah, he's been incredible. Go ahead with if you got more winners, and if not, just go to your losers.
That's it for winners. So I'll move on to losers. USC defense. Friday night, I had USC. I think Tulman might have too, right? Oh yeah. So that was a frustrating game for us. And it was extremely frustrating watching the USC defense. They were just getting gashed all night. They were losing to Colorado for much of the game. They ended up pulling out the win, but were never even close to covering the number. So,
God, I don't know. We'll talk about it later. I don't know what to think about USC right now.
I got thoughts on them because I have a bet on them, and I'll explain why.
Yeah, I thought they were playing better, and that was bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they were missing.
More on USC
They
later,
were
but-
missing some key guys. We'll talk about that. But yeah, go ahead, Addison.
Another loser I got is UMass. We've been talking about this a lot this year. Like, this has got to be one of the worst teams that we've ever seen in college football. They gave up 50 plus to Rutgers and UConn now. I think they're giving up an average of close to 60 points a game or something like that. So you get smoked by those teams. Like, those are bottom 10 to 20 teams in the country. So UMass is just that bad. Like, everyone else is a lot better than them at this point. So unfortunate for UMass. And then South Carolina, get smoked by Tennessee, you got to make the loser list. I thought about taking Tennessee, but when I found out that Garantano was going to be the quarterback, I thought that I should stay away from it. But it didn't matter. They ended up smoking South Carolina, and that win over Georgia for South Carolina seems like an eternity ago at this point.
Yeah, I've got UMass also. I think if they played Akron again, they would lose. They are by far and away the worst team I've ever seen. They're definitely a loser of the year candidate. This next program is also a loser of the year candidate. Sparty. They had a perfect spot set up for them to turn their season around. They were getting Penn State. Michigan State was off a bye, home, getting Penn State off of two emotional and physically draining games. And, it's not like in the box score, Penn State didn't exactly dominate them, but Sparty did nothing to make you think that they had any chance in the game. Their offense is just atrocious. I think Mark D'Antonio made a massive error in judgment and just being way too loyal to his staff when, Michigan State, they basically told him you need to reshuffle this year. That was unacceptable on offense, and all he did, and we've talked about this many times, he just moved coaches around on the staff he put some defensive guys on offense, some offensive guys on defense. I believe he still employs Jim Bowman, right, Tulman?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's just, that's horrific.
Lamar sucks.
Yeah. So, Sparty is massive loser this week. Definitely a loser of the year candidate for me now. And then Mizzou, you're playing Kentucky, who is down 7 quarterbacks. You should go in there and at least beat them, maybe not cover, but to just go in there and just get basically physically dominated is kind of pathetic. So Mizzou definitely a loser. Tulman, go ahead with your losers and then our conspiracy corner for the week.
Just to add on to Mizzou being the loser, they lost 29-7 against Kentucky, who was playing Lynn Bowden, who's not a quarterback at quarterback,
Right.
And he ran the ball. I mean, they knew it. They knew what the play was every play. He was going to run the ball, and he ended up with over 20 carries for over 200 yards.
Yeah, it's pathetic.
So we thought that Mizzou at one point was in the S&P Plus top 10, and we thought that they were going to be a threat to beat Georgia, but back-to-back weeks.
I have no idea what to think of them. Yeah, I don't know.
It's been rough for them.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last one is, look, I'm not going to call Oklahoma a loser for losing, but their loss did create some kind of left the door open for a one-loss team to be in the mix. Notre Dame had a chance, and now they're completely out of the college football playoff.
Yeah, Oklahoma, that's definitely not the best loss. Even if, I know in Bill C's advanced box scores, they're still winning that game most of the time, but a loss is a loss, and especially when you are that big of a favorite, that's not going to bode well for them. So, Tolman, why don't you go ahead with our buddy up north, Josh Gaddis there.
Well, first we got to update a little bit of news on Conspiracy Corner. So the NCAA did vote today to explore ways to allow players to profit. So some momentum from cases in California and new legislation maybe pushing the NCAA in what I believe is the right direction. Also, on that note, NCAA is considering a comeback since players can benefit from their likeness. So EA Sports NCAA video game, one of the best video games of all time, right, guys?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So the real conspiracy corner tonight is about Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, and Josh Gaddis. This is something that I completely made up, and I want to see what you guys think. But on Saturday night, I think Michigan found an identity, and it was their old identity of finding success in the power run game. And Josh Gaddis was brought in by Jim Harbaugh to transition Michigan to a more modern offense by running the spread. Hasn't really worked out this year. Shea Patterson's been wildly inconsistent and at times absolutely horrible, just not an efficient quarterback. Doesn't seem to be a good fit between Josh Gaddis and running the spread at Michigan. So Michigan found their identity with the power run game. And earlier in the week, Jim Harbaugh had to defend some tweets and some rumors about recruiting officials from other schools, saying that he's planning on leaving. He had to defend that, and he was strong in his defense of that. I believe that Jim Harbaugh truly does want to stay at Michigan, and he put his foot down with Josh Gaddis and said, we're going back to our old identity. We're going to do things that I'm comfortable with, get the power run game back up and going. And I think he did that to kind of salvage what had been a very poor offensive effort from Michigan this season. So I think that Jim Harbaugh wants to stay. He wants to reestablish the power run game identity. And I wouldn't be surprised if Josh Gaddis and Jim Harbaugh agreed to mutually part ways at the end of the season. So my question to you guys is if something were like this to happen, would this be Michigan sacrificing, some long-term success by transitioning to a modern offense just for short-term success under Harbaugh with the kind of antiquated power run game? What do you guys think?
I think it's possible if you feel like you're a coach that has to kind of like save his own ass, then I could see Harbaugh doing something like that to where, I think when these coaches get pushed into a corner, they do want to kind of, whether it's on the field or off the field, they implement what they're comfortable with. And so, if Harbaugh and Gaddis aren't meshing, then I could see that totally happening because Gaddis, he made the move there to make a name for himself and to show that it wasn't just Mike Locksley's offense in Alabama. And clearly it's not working out as far as it before the Notre Dame game. Like you said, Tulman, Gaddis kind of had his hands on the offense, and you could tell that Harbaugh maybe was starting to take that away from him. And it definitely against Notre Dame looked like that could be the case. But Addison, what were your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't be surprised if Gaddis just kind of realizes that, it's not a good situation for him. Shea, he'll be gone after this year, but I think that McCaffrey, is kind of even less of a passer than Shea is. Like he's kind of more of a running threat thing, like from what I've heard.
Yeah, I kind of like McCaffrey for them going forward.
Yeah, I thought they should have put him in weeks ago. To be honest, I think they'd be better with him. But
yeah, Shea just hasn't been good at all.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think they have like a guy at quarterback. Even after this year, that would be like good guy to go. Spread passing offense with.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. They certainly, they found something against Notre Dame, but, as we said, that was, they're playing probably an overrated team, and it fit what they wanted to do. I think that if Michigan plays somebody like, for example, Ohio State, somebody that can kind of put the clamps down on them and force Shea to have to make plays under pressure, I think it's going to be still pretty bad for them. Another interesting Conspiracy Corner segment. Now we'll move on to our Week 10 games. And we're going to start up in Seattle. We got Utah at Washington, which like we said, it's now a pretty significant game for the Pac-12 as far as Utah being possibly a playoff contender now. I believe we're going to call that line Utah -3.5. I believe currently. Tulman, why don't you go ahead and let's start with when Utah has the football, or do you want to start when Washington has the football? I'll leave it up to you.
Oh, I can do. When Utah has the football.
Yeah, why don't you just give us kind of what your thoughts are? Because you took Utah, right, and you got them at a good number, like the best number you could get them, I believe, at I think 1.5. But just kind of give these viewers your thoughts on what's going to happen when Utah has the ball.
Well, Utah has the number one first down rate in the country, so they're gonna. I believe that they're gonna sustain drives and have success controlling the ball. Also, 80% of their trips to the red zone result in a touchdown. So they have 19 red zone rushing touchdowns. That is one of Washington's weaknesses. The majority of the touchdowns, around 50% of the red zone scores for Washington have been rushing touchdowns. So I think that Utah is going to have success sustaining drives. Washington's strength as a defense is not giving up explosives, but Utah, I think, is just a more efficient team offensively overall. Zach Moss is healthy. Put up incredible running stats the last couple weeks, and I think Utah has an edge offensively, controlling the ball, controlling the game.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Washington, 102nd in standard down line yards on defense, 90th success rate, 126th in power success rate, 103rd in stuff rate. I mean, I think Moss and Huntley with his legs, I think they're definitely going to be able to sustain drives, keep themselves ahead of the sticks. As you said, Tulman, when they get in the red zone, they're going to score touchdowns. I think it's, that's where, if Washington is going to have a chance at winning this game, they got to shut down that run game and try to get Huntley to throw a little bit more. But the problem is that Utah's been pretty damn efficient passing it. Huntley's been very accurate this year. Utah has been very good passing the ball, I think even better than what most people thought. So we're asking a lot from Washington on defense this week. But Addison, let's flip to when Washington has the ball. Are they going to be able, to do enough if we feel like Utah's got a pretty big edge offensively?
Well, it's going to be tough. I really like how Utah's defense is playing ever since that USC loss. I would say they're probably one of the hottest defenses in the country right now. The last 4 games, they're only allowing 6 points per game. Against the run, they've been elite. In that 4-game stretch, they played a pretty good Washington State offense, held them to 13 points. Some of these quarterbacks they've played, actually last week, the game against Cal was down to their 3rd or 4th string quarterback, so that was pretty ugly for Cal. But the other 3 games, they've played decent competition, and they're holding quarterbacks in that stretch to under 50% completion percentage. So, whether it's the run or the pass, Utah's done really well for about the last month defensively, and they're just playing really well right now. So I think it's going to be tough for Washington. A couple weeks ago against the solid Oregon defense, they were able to find some success. They put up 31 points in that game. Earlier in the season against a good Cal defense, they were only able to put up 19 points, and they ended up losing that one. I think it's going to be tougher for them this week, though.
Yeah, Utah is number 1 in the country in preventing pass explosives. They've been pretty efficient as far as just defending the pass overall. As you said, Addison, this is going to be I think it's going to be good on good as far as Washington's offensive line's actually graded out very well. They actually have been running the ball pretty well this year, but that's Utah's strength. So I think if Washington's going to have a chance, they are going to have to run the ball well and be able to open it up a little bit for Eason, because I think if Washington puts themselves in a lot of obvious passing situations, it's going to be tough on Eason. I think they're going to struggle in those situations. And so I would say, if we're just going off of the number at 3.5, I would still lean Utah. I don't know how much value there is in that number now, but I think Tulman's definitely on the right side as far as getting it 3, or I guess I would take Utah at 3, and I wouldn't take Washington at 3. So I feel pretty strongly about Utah in this game. Tulman, we know your bet obviously by now, but Addison at 3.5, which way do you lean?
Yeah, well, just to add on, like the main deciding factor for me on the bet was, Washington finds the most success offensively when they are successful on explosive plays. That's I believe one of Utah's strengths.
Right.
Outside of the game against USC, Washington's in the bottom half of the country and drives stalling out. So I think that's going to be an issue for them.
Yeah, for sure. Addison, thoughts on the number?
I would lean Utah.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to picture Washington losing 3 home games this year, but unfortunately for them, that's kind of how I see it going right now.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they won. I just think it's a bad matchup. I think Utah's a little bit better than Oregon. I think they present more problems, like stylistically, compared to Oregon. So I think if Washington was going to have the kind of year that they're usually looking to have as of recent, then I think they needed to beat Oregon. And I just think I know they're off a bye, but I think Utah just presents a lot of problems for them. So we'll move on to the next game. Kind of as we alluded to, it could be a little more interesting just because we kind of have a Jekyll and Hyde situation with USC. But Oregon is at USC. Call it 4.5 right now. I believe Oregon's giving 4.5. That line is down from, I think, 6 or 6.5. Addison, I'll start with you, and I'll let you decide if you want to start with when Oregon has the ball or when USC has the ball.
I'll go with Oregon.
Okay, go for it.
Well, we mentioned earlier USC defensively last week, not good at all, banged up. Colorado pretty much had their way with them for a lot of the game until about the fourth quarter. And Oregon has been running the ball pretty well lately. Herbert's been solid all year. Only 1 interception on the season for him. CJ Verdell, the last 3 weeks, is averaging 10 yards a carry. So Oregon, the running game coming around, that we know they've got a great offensive line. So when they have that, combine that with Herbert, the passing game, the offense is playing pretty well right now. So I think they'll be able to have success against USC, especially if USC doesn't get some of those guys back defensively. I was surprised, how much USC struggled with Colorado last week.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. We know that SC was without both starting defensive ends last week. They were without a starting linebacker. I think a couple of their guys in the secondary were playing a little banged up. I think, short week, up in altitude, maybe a look-ahead spot. And I'm not trying to just cover for USC's ass. They've been kind of inconsistent all year, and they've been beat up all year. But when they've been good, they've been pretty good. And I think that they've been pretty good at preventing explosives, especially through the pass game. Oregon hasn't been really generating a lot of those this year. I think where Addison, you mentioned it. I think the key matchup as far as when Oregon does have the ball is going to be, in fact, when they're attempting to run it. We know how good their offensive line is. Even though Verdell's been, he definitely has been a little bit better the last few weeks. The running game's been a little bit better. I don't love their running backs. I don't think they really make guys miss. I don't think they're game changers at all. If USC is quite a bit healthier and they can focus on, you know, trying to be a little bit more successful against the run, then I think they have a good chance to find some success there. But if Oregon is able to run the ball, that is going to present some problems.
Yeah, Oregon's backs, I don't really love them either because they're all kind of undersized.
Right.
Actually, they're really undersized, but their O-line plays well enough to make holes for them. USC gave up 196 to Colorado on the ground, gave up over 300 to Notre Dame on the ground, so definitely think that Oregon could have some opportunities there.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree. There's been a few weeks where they've been really poor against the run. They have to step up here, and no excuses about them being injured or anything. They just need to play better in this spot. Tulman, so obviously you're gonna get SC with the ball. What are we expecting to see then?
So USC is 13th in the S&P Plus in offensive efficiency. It's due to explosive plays. They get explosive plays out of a system that's really designed to be short passing, kind of control the ball through the pass game. But they have great playmakers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Michael Pittman Jr., who's, made that offense a little bit more explosive. So USC... Yeah, but USC's drives, they tend to stall out. So they're going to need to be getting big plays to stay in the game offensively. Oregon, they've been consistently good defensively. They're 14th in the S&P Plus in defensive efficiency. Pretty good against explosives, pretty good in drive efficiency rating. But they have not been great against good offenses this year. Struggled last week against the Pirate. Struggled a little bit, got worn out towards the end of the game against Auburn, and also struggled a little bit at times against Washington.
Yeah, that's your last point is kind of one I was going to make, is that I think Oregon's defense is very good, but when they've had to play some athletes, especially in space in the passing game, they haven't been quite as good. They've given up actually a decent amount of explosives in the pass game, and I think that's where SC actually has a little bit of an advantage. I think that Slovis fits what Graham Harrell wants to do perfectly, and I think that that's going to keep USC in this game and make this kind of a tight one for Oregon. I think that SC actually is. I think they're getting at least one of their running backs back. They were on like their 5th and 6th string running back last week. They were using St. Brown like on jet sweeps. Oregon has been overall very good against the run, but I think just overall success rate, they actually haven't been that great. SC's been pretty decent, but it's mainly going to be in the passing game. If SC's got any chance of winning this game, as you said, Tulman, they're going to have to make big plays in the passing game, and I think they're going to make enough to keep it within the number. I did take SC +5. Maybe with Oregon being the ranked team, if this gets steamed to 6 or so, I will reinvest. But this could backfire. I could see, Oregon having their way on the ground possibly to where they might keep USC's offense off the field, but I don't see it happening quite that way. I do like USC to cover here. Tulman, your thoughts on, we'll call it 4.5. Which way would you lean there?
I don't have much of a thought here.
Okay.
Under Clay Helton and under Mario Cristobal, I get burned by these teams too many times. So both of them together, I'm out.
Yeah, I don't blame you there. It's definitely not the best coaching matchup. Addison, 4.5. Which way do you lean?
Tulman just made a good point with Clay Helton there.
Yeah.
Because I lean USC, but you never know with Clay Helton.
He's terrible as a dog. I mean, he's horrible as an underdog. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, I mean, I expect USC to be able to have some success or enough success offensively to keep it close.
Right.
Oregon, what was it, 3 weeks ago, they were the number 1 rated defense in the S&P, and they've fallen all the way to 24 after the last 2 games.
Right.
They've given up over 30 points in each of those games. Now, these are good offenses. Like Washington and Washington State, I think, are both top 10 offenses.
Yeah, for sure.
So USC not quite that good, but they're like on that level, I would say. So I think they should be able to find some success. Oregon has obviously, they've had tough games the last 2 weeks. They were able to pull both out at the end. But I wouldn't be surprised if this game goes, a similar direction. It's just close and decided at the very end.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I actually do want to watch it, but we'll move on to the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. We got Florida and Georgia this weekend, both teams off a bye. Georgia right now is up to a 6.5-point favorite, I believe. I don't remember exactly where this opened, but it got all the way down to 3.5, and then it got bet pretty hard up to 6.5. Let's see, who did I start with last time? Well, Tulman, I'll let you go ahead and choose. Do you want Florida on offense or do you want Georgia?
We'll go when Georgia has the ball.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Okay, so Georgia, 11th 11th ranked in the S&P Plus for offensive efficiency. Georgia sustains drives in the last consistently all year. Their strength has been in the running game, averaging 6.1 yards per carry. And that's been one of Florida's weaknesses. Metrically, they look okay just on the season, allowing about 4 yards per carry, but in the last 3 weeks against better competition, they've allowed over 5 yards per carry in those games. So Georgia does not get explosive plays. They've had issues with their receivers getting separation. We think their best receiver, Cager, is going to be back this week. That could help them out. So, Florida's one of those teams that you don't want to have issues with receivers getting separation because they have such a strong pass rush. Their defensive line's getting healthy. But I do see an edge here for Georgia in the running game.
Yeah, Georgia, amazingly efficient, very, 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 like a nationally elite red zone team, really on both sides of the ball. We're going to get into that in a second when Addison talks about when Florida has the ball. But, I think Fromm's going to have to make some plays in this game. I think that Florida knows that Georgia's going to want to run the ball. They're overly conservative. That's been our main issue with Georgia this year. If Florida sells out to stop the run, then these receivers are going to have to make some plays. Fromm's not going to be able to just check it down every time. But they have been very efficient. I do think they'll find some success running the ball. It'll be interesting to see, though. Addison, let's flip to when Florida has the football now.
Okay, well, with Florida, running game, they're near the bottom of the country in rushing attempts per game. They're not particularly successful when they do run it, so they're definitely going to need Kyle Trask to play well. But he has, he's been surprisingly good ever since he stepped in for Franks this year. He's been pretty solid. He's going to be definitely the second best quarterback Georgia's seen this year so far after Ian Book. Georgia's actually seen some pretty shitty quarterbacks, to be honest, this year. Definitely a little more of a challenge for Georgia in that respect. He's going to have to play well in Florida. Florida will need just like a little bit out of their run game. We saw against Auburn, they popped a long touchdown run. Like, if they can just get, like, something like that out of the running game, with the athletes that they have, if they can just, generate a big play or something. And I'm not asking them to, run for, like, 200 yards. Just, like, if they can get, like, one or two big plays, those types of plays can, change these kind of games. So I think that's what Florida – I think that's all they look for out of their run game. And then besides that, it's just Trask just – getting to be efficient and take care of the ball, and then hopefully their defense is helping out their offense and keeping them in it.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think Trask has to play well on the spot. I think they need to get a little something, a little pop out of that run game. Florida in their own right, they've actually been, I would say, a solid red zone team on both sides of the ball. Georgia, again, elite defensively in the red zone. Something else that when I was digging more into this game and why I ended up booking it at -4 is that Georgia, they've only had I think they're 128th in the country as far as like just defensive plays, like being on the field on defense. I think that's because their offense has been incredibly efficient. They just hold on to the ball forever. Georgia does have, I think, a little bit of a chance, or not a little bit, but I think they have a great chance to create some havoc. Florida's pretty just average as far as havoc allowed. Georgia ranks pretty high, even if they haven't really been on the field that much. I think if they're on the field more, they have a chance to probably rank even higher. So I think they do enough defensively to make Trask feel a little bit uncomfortable. And I obviously I said I already booked it at 4. If I'm forced to choose at like 6.5 and I didn't already have a bet, I still would lean Georgia just for those reasons. I think they do enough in the red zone, create just enough havoc to win this game by 7 to 10 points. Tulman, I know you booked Georgia already as well. So, Addison, your thoughts at 6.5? Maybe if it gets to 7, would you then consider Florida?
That's kind of what I want to see, or I want to see if that happens.
Yeah.
I'd probably lean Florida. I'm not too confident in that yet. This also has been a blowout like the last 5 years. Georgia winning the last couple, Florida winning the 3 before that. But yeah, surprisingly kind of not close games on the field.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't looked back at the recent series history, but I would have just guessed off the top of my head that it's a pretty close series, but apparently not. So yeah, all right. Well, yeah, we think. Addison, do you think Georgia wins the game though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems like we all feel pretty confident about Georgia. SC Oregon, I think that's going to be pretty interesting. I think Oregon pulls it out, but I think it's within a field goal. And then Washington, Utah, we obviously seem to be pretty confident in Utah there. So let's go ahead and move on to our Week 10 bets. The best part of this pod. And, this pod's been pretty successful overall this year. We've got a pretty good track record over the last 3 years. So, Addison, I don't see any bets on the dock for you. Do you just want to talk about some leans, or do you have any bets that you've made that you just haven't put down on the dock yet?
I haven't put any down yet, but there are some I'm looking at. Like, I'm just scrolling through.
Yeah.
Kansas is a little interesting to me. Kansas State's ranked now, coming off a big win at Kansas, and Kansas has been playing well, so that's one that I'm definitely going to look into more. Oregon State, I was thinking about them. It's at 5.5 right now. Would have been nice to get it earlier because I think it was higher than that, wasn't it?
Yeah, Tom and I both got it early at 7, and then Kansas was also 7.
I would have taken it at 7 for sure. So
yeah,
that's one that have to decide if I still want to do that.
Right.
But Mississippi at Auburn, I'm definitely thinking about taking Mississippi plus 20 right now. Those are the main ones that are jumping out to me right now.
Okay. Tulman, why don't you go ahead and give a few of your favorite ones for the week?
Yeah, so best bet of the week, primetime game on ABC, SMU at Memphis. Currently, it's SMU getting 5.5 points. That line has moved in favor of Memphis, so it opened at Memphis minus 3.5. So I actually like SMU in this game. I like SMU to cover. I like SMU to win the game on the field. I took them at both plus 3.5 and plus 5.5. SMU is a top 20 team in the country and havoc created. Memphis is in the bottom 110 in the country and havoc allowed. So I think that's a big edge there for SMU when otherwise symmetrically these teams appear somewhat even. I like Army getting 15 points at Air Force, just kind of a principle for me. I like Surf's Academies to play games close. I think 15 points is a lot, giving Army and when two teams that respect each other a lot play each other. And finally, I like under 61 in Wake Forest versus NC State. Some uncertainty about whether Jamie Newman's going to play. NC State is starting a new quarterback this week, a redshirt freshman. So I think potentially two backup quarterbacks playing each other. I typically like the under in those situations.
Okay, yeah, that's good info. I didn't know that about that game. Yeah, I'll give a few here, I guess. Addison, Tulman and I pretty much have everything you were leaning at some level. I was able to jump on Kansas pretty early. I think the market is severely undervaluing Kansas right now, and they might for the rest of the year unless they win this game outright also. K-State obviously coming off of that big win against Oklahoma. Kansas getting another Big 12 win in their own right, but I think K-State's is a little bit more emotionally charged. I think the casual bettor and fan doesn't know shit about Kansas football. They have a completely new offense as of, right before their bye week 3 weeks ago. They really should have, you can argue that they should have beat Texas. And I know Texas is beat up, but it's still Kansas football. Should have beat Texas, did beat Texas Tech. I think they have a really good chance to win this football game. So I'm pretty happy with what I got. I still think, like Addison, if you're considering it 5.5, 6, I think 6 would be nice, getting that kind of secondary number there. But I also did take Ole Miss plus 20. I'm going to see if I can hopefully get 21 on that. That'd be huge. One in particular that we haven't talked about that I like a lot, it's possibly a best bet candidate. BC plus 3 at Syracuse. Tulman, I know you've got that also. Think there is a pretty big havoc mismatch there as far as BC doesn't allow a whole lot of havoc. Syracuse allows like as much as possible. I think they've given up the most amount of sacks in FBS. I think when I dug into it, I don't have the exact stats here, but if you just look at Syracuse, their metrics on the surface, their run D, their D line looks pretty decent actually. But they played Holy Cross in like another FCS school, I think, or maybe one of the horrific FBS schools. Syracuse against Power 5 teams, though, I think they rank like in the hundreds as far as yards per carry given up. BC, you've got that power run game between A.J. Dillon, and then, embarrassing to say, I don't even know who the second running back is. I've seen him the last few weeks, and it's just another 240-pound guy that can just carry the rock. So I think BC goes into the Carrier Dome and wins that game, actually. But, Tolman, I actually have another I have a total that could be the best bet for the week, because I would like to make one of these other ones the best bet, but the line's moved on them too much. I'm going to say BYU, Utah State under 50. Both teams are like dead last and I think second to last in red zone scoring. They just don't get touchdowns. Both offenses just haven't been as good as I think anybody thought they might be if you know anything about these schools. So that's a potential candidate. But I see Corey's got some bets on here. Looks like he's got Navy at UConn. I usually wouldn't want to lay that many points with an option team, but UConn is so terrible on defense that I could see Navy just rolling them. But yeah, I don't see any picks from Steele. He usually doesn't put them till like Friday night, Saturday morning. So any final thoughts tonight, Tulman?
Yeah, sure. So we haven't talked about the ACC in a while. Clemson's not going to have a relevant game really for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually sitting here just looking at the ACC Coastal Wheel of Destiny standings and like clicking on the teams and like looking at their schedules. I have no idea right now. Like in the 4 games remaining for all these teams, I can see them all going 2-2.
Yeah, I was kind of looking.
I root for that to happen every single year.
Yeah. I was looking.
This year, I have no. I'm not seeing anything clear cut.
It's still possible for there to be a 6-way tie in the Coastal. It's still in play, so we'll see. I guess.
I was looking through some of my own numbers that I have like punched in for these power ratings, and I have Miami as the second best team in the ACC, and like it just makes me want to vomit. Like I don't know how that's possible. I will preface that by saying that teams like Virginia, Pitt, like they're all within like a point or two of them, I think. But I mean, that's how bad that conference is this year. You got Clemson, and then you just have a bunch of mediocre trash. It's just that mediocre wheel of destiny that we talked about, and it'll be interesting to kind of see who comes out of there to get their ass whipped by Clemson in the title game. But Addison, any final thoughts?
Well, the undefeated teams are kind of just all off this week. Penn State, Minnesota, both on byes. They play each other next week. Alabama, LSU, both on byes. They play each other next week. Ohio State's on a bye. Clemson is basically on a bye. They play Wofford.
Yeah.
I forget who Baylor plays, but I think it's someone not good.
West Virginia on
West
Thursday
Virginia,
night.
yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
Another bad team. So not a lot of shakeup probably going to happen this week, but next week things really start to get interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot to talk about, and we finally are going to talk about Alabama. I feel like we haven't really talked about them all year. Speaking of programs that we haven't talked about, so that's going to do it for the Week 10 episode. And as always, check the description box below. We'll have the up-to-date betting records against the spread, and we're going to have our Week 10 bets that, not only the ones that we just mentioned on air, but all the other bets that we've made, and they'll be updated up to, pretty much noon kickoff on Saturday. So, check those out. Hopefully you guys can make some money off of those, and we will see you next week for Week 11.